want to turn things over to Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer. And Craig, we aren't just under a hurricane watch, we're also under a storm surge watch as well.
That's correct. And so the two things that we're talking about there, the hurricane watch and the storm surge watch, and I think Liz is back there. Liz, I'm going to ask you if you could, and this may be kind of complicated, to turn off one of the location points there. It's kind of cluttered up. If you can't, that's okay. We'll move on. But let me first go back to the hurricane watch and the storm surge watch. Those are the two biggest hazards of the storm that we face here. Storm surge, not rainfall, but ocean flooding. Surge, water that comes in, the ocean that comes in, pushed by the wind. It's not a wall of water. I know you hear, every now and then we hear, and if it's a wall of water, it's not a wall of water. It's waves that come in rushing on top of each other, growing with height and with great force too. Water has tremendous force and it can do a lot of damage when it sweeps through an area. It can carry homes away, it can tear buildings apart, it can move cars. It's just not something you want to be in at all, and so that's why we evacuate for the storm surge. We can survive the wind. The wind may be very, very strong, but we can survive that. We can't survive the storm surge, and that's why we have to get out of those areas. The 5 o'clock advisory, here it is, and we will fix that so it looks a little nicer. 175-mile-an-hour winds moving to the west-northwest at 16, Category 5. The pressure down there, and it got a little bit lower. It's been hovering right here around 922 millibars. We'll keep an eye on that because if we see it start to drop again, which is possible, then it could be an indication that the storm is strengthening, but it is so intense right now. I think in the big scheme of things, whether it goes up in wind speed a little bit or down in wind speed a little bit, the overall impact is going to be the same. A catastrophic type of hurricane here, especially around the eye wall, that one part of the storm that is the most intense. So here is the way the storm looks in terms of its size. It has been growing. It's been out there for a long time, and it's been very, very intense for a long time, and it's pushing a lot of water with it. So the forecast in the Turks and Caicos was for a storm surge of up to 20 feet, which means that it's like halfway up the ceiling and out of camera range here, and that moving with current too, not just the water coming up. It's rushing in, and then it's going to slowly recede after the storm passes, or if the eye goes over, may rush back the other way. But it's very, very deadly. Here is we go into the future track. The 5 p.m. or the 2 p.m. rather Friday time frame, still Category 5 is the forecast intensity. Then there's a point here between 2 p.m. Friday and 2 a.m. Saturday where the forecast is for it to come down in category to Category 4. Category 4, 130 to 155 mile-an-hour winds. So there's our Saturday position. There's our Sunday position now, and the track has shifted a little bit to the west. This is the best estimate, or the best great minds at the Hurricane Center put together and say, based on this model, how it's performing, all the models, this is where we think the storm is going to be. Now, it could be a little bit further here to the east. It could be a little bit further to the west. Those are still possibilities. But as the storm gets closer, the cone gets smaller because all those possibilities decrease. The storm just can't all of a sudden spin and go the other direction. Here we go on up into the Monday time frame. And it could potentially run the peninsula, and that would be probably one of the worst case scenarios if you think about it, because we're going to take all of the infrastructure and we're going to impact it from south to north. That means that resources, reinforcements, help coming in from the north are going to run into potential problems up here trying to get to us. That's why I think the governor and many of the utilities and services have done a very, very good job of trying to pre-position as much material, resources, and help down here ahead of the storm so that they don't get cut off trying to come down here and help us after the storm. There we go into the Tuesday time frame there. All right, so we showed you this before. This is where the hurricane, the highest winds of the hurricane force winds would be going right through there, that red area coming into South Florida. The values I showed you were around 48% before. The new advisory values, check these out. They are even higher. The Key Largo area now, the hurricane, the chance of a hurricane force winds, 58%, now 51%, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. And I know I keep mentioning Miami. I'm using it more as a reference point. I mean Broward, Miami-Dade, as well as the Keys when I say Miami. So please, in the Broward area, I'm talking about you too, and in the Keys, I'm talking about you too. Now what's interesting is that the highest concentration of wind is in the upper Keys here into South Florida. The values decrease quickly as you go to Key West, but Storm surge is still a threat throughout the entire Keys chain, and the storm surge on the East Coast and that significant wind threat now over the east coast of South Florida. Tomorrow is the last good weather day. You're going to want to shutter up and do the best that you can. Get everything out of your yard. Prepare your house for the biggest wind it has ever seen. On Saturday, winds and squalls increase, and by Sunday, that is our hunker down day. That's the day we're going to ride out and get through this storm.